Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Sierra Obermark.
I'm Sam Williams.
And I'm Aurelia Lieb. And I'm delighted to welcome our special guest today, which is the wonderful Sequoia Simone. Hi, Sequoia.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. Y'all reached out to me with a wild idea, and I was like, yes, let's do that.
And you are the perfect guest for that wild idea because for the few people who listen to this podcast who don't know Sequoia's voice, do you want to just quickly tell where you usually can be heard talking about Harry Potter and other nerdy stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple of podcasts where you can find me. One is Fanatical Fix and Where to Find Them, which is a Harry Potter fan fiction podcast delving into the archives of 2008 and pre-2008, which were a wild time and a wonderful time, and we love fan fiction. So I live in the fan fiction space, and then I have another show where we take romance movies and we rewrite them as horror films. So
I love that so much.
The kind of it's called But Make It Scary, and it is my baby, and I love it so much.
That is fantastic. Subscribing immediately.
Well, it's going to work really well with this particular podcast as well.
Yeah. Sam had the idea for what we're doing today, which we're probably going to tell you in a bit. And I was like, I know the perfect guest.
Yeah, it's all coming together.
So why don't you tell our listeners a bit about your Harry Potter nerdy side? So what's your Hogwarts house? How did you discover Harry Potter? If you have a favorite book or a favorite character, do share.
Yeah, absolutely. So my Hogwarts house is Slytherin through and through. Ambition is my number one trait. And every single quiz tells me, and I thought I was a Ravenclaw for a really long time, and that was just that was just because my favorite color was blue as a child. It really didn't have anything to do with anything else. But yeah, my journey to Harry Potter was that my mom's friend got me for my birthday as a child the fourth Harry Potter book. It was like they wandered into a Barnes and Noble and were like, child book, and somebody just like put something in their hands, or they like plucked it off of a table of like bestsellers or something. So I got the fourth Harry Potter book and I read it and I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But seems rad and cool. And then they were like, oh, there's 3 more books before this book. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I went back and I read the other 3, which if you read 4 before 2 is ruined. Just absolutely ruined. Because the whole time I'm just like, oh, that's Voldemort. Do not speak to him, which is just like, it's a bummer because 2 is like so many people's favorite book. And it's my least favorite book because I just never got the experience of like unraveling the mystery in real time. So my favorite book is 7. I like the culmination of the story. I like how everything comes together. I like how everything, all of the little things that had to happen for the ending to go the way that it went, and how things sort of come together. So that's my favorite book. And then picking a favorite character is really hard because I am so in fandom spaces that like, what are the characters? Who is Draco? He's very gay. He wears leather pants, like he's the Ice Prince of Slytherin. I just like, who are characters? But I sort of fall back upon Ginny as being my favorite character because she rules. unequivocally the entire time. And that's, a consequence of a couple things, including that she's like not one of the main characters. So, since we spend a little bit less time with her, we get a little bit less of, maybe points where she's not so great. And like the main characters, we get to see a little bit more of their moments where you're like, don't do that. But I really love Ginny's energy. And, I was in college and all of college a Quidditch girl, so you gotta, yeah.
I feel like Ginny also stays the most consistent in fanfics. Like she doesn't divert as much as like Remus and Tonks or Sirius or Bellatrix or Harry or
even Draco.
Drapple. Yeah, especially Drapple. Yeah,
yeah, she does. She's for the most part she stays pretty much the same, unless we're like in a Drinny world. As soon as you get into Draco / Ginny, like Ginny has to be a completely different character in order for that to work out. But for the most part, yeah, she's.
I feel like once you mix into Draco's inkpot, there everyone changes. Like Percy and Draco, it's a very different Percy. Like Grorup and Draco, very different Grorup.
Yeah, Percy / Draco,
right?
Just coming
They're
in
both
here.
so ambitious. My
really
father
are.
will hear about this.
Will say in the throes of that pre-2008 fan fiction world, Hermione ones got me every time. Loved them. There were so many that were just really well written, and so I had to like it, even if that wasn't like what I would put together in my own thought. I was like, you make some valid points here.
Yeah. Most of the ones that are like, this is a fan fiction written pre-2008 and it is the size of a trilogy of books, that's where the Hermione lives, is you're like, people were just Hermioneing so hard that they wrote like novels and then another novel and then another novel.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my first foray into fan fiction scarred me and scared me off of it for a great maybe 15 years. It must have been like 2005, so I was 12, 13, somewhere around that. And I opened up a story that was only like 17 pages of Victor Crumb, Draco Malfoy, and Hermione having a threesome. And I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I think I'm good.
Gotta watch those tags, man.
I was wondering if you found squid content on your first foray into
fanfic.
Professor's rating
and
immediately.
Squid content.
I was not ready for it. Let me tell you, I was like, what even are these things? Like, I don't understand what that thing is.
Yeah. Yep.
That's fair.
I was removed from sex ed classes, so the scientific terms of body parts had eluded me.
I was removed from sex ed classes too.
Yeah, well,
and you don't want fan fiction to be your sex ed class. You don't want nobody.
It was.
You shouldn't.
Just putting it out there. I learned a lot.
All right. That is not what our episode is about. So let's dive on in. Today, for episode 19, we've gathered to discuss what if Harry Potter was horror. Our recommended reading. You could go and read any Goosebumps, Stephen King, my personal favorite, Tananarive Due. You could watch Jordan Peele movies, Alfred Hitchcock, classic horror movies like Dracula. And then if you want to watch Ralph Fiennes star in a horror movie, you got to go watch 2022's The Menu.
All right. Before we jump into our main discussion, let's raise a toast to the comments on episode 16, which was the episode was about the journeys to Hogwarts, which I believe Sam and Sierra, you were both on. I wasn't, so I got to listen. And we raise our glass to Absent-Minded Raven, who said, I always had the impression that regardless of who came to visit, and I agree, Hagrid wasn't the best choice, Harry was getting the magical version of the form letter rather than the muggle-born version. There's no way McGonagall's writing 300 to 1,000 letters by hand, especially with the multitudes sent to harass the Dursley. It's understandable that they'd assume Harry knows more than he does, but it's not very reasonable to expect Petunia to impart that information. Regardless of how much she knows, which is more than she's willing to admit, she's still an outsider and thus is going to have significant blind spots. But then, Harry not being told stuff is kind of a theme of the series.
I am totally here for McGonagall spending her entire summer break just writing letter after letter hand, like with the quill on fire as she pens, like Alexander Hamilton's. He wrote the other 51. Like that's McGonagall's energy.
I mean, we have to agree that was only Dumbledore's idea, right? Like, McGonagall found
100%.
out after the fact that was when that went down, and she went, Albus? Like, what on earth?
Yeah, 100%.
She's the sensible one. She's the one effectively running the school because Dumbledore does whatever Dumbledore does.
Right. But it does have the same energy as Chapter 3 of Deathly Hallows, which is also with the Dursleys, where he has the glasses of mead or whatever wine bouncing on top of the head. Like that, we're on the same vibe, same energy with the 1,000 letters shooting through the fireplace.
And he's probably the one who's like, who's a sensible person I could send to pick up Harry? Hagrid.
We'll get to what the horror version of that is much later in this podcast. I'm very excited to reveal what I believe the horror version of Hagrid going and meeting the Dursleys looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the theme of Harry not being told stuff, like don't tell the hero anything because then he won't be able to figure out on himself. Like that feels right. Feels right. It feels like Dumbledore.
Yeah, I like the whole whenever we have the mentor character can never say enough. It's like especially in like, I know we've recently talked about Percy Jackson. Chiron is the same thing. He's like never answering any questions.
Yeah. Half answering a question, and the other half of the answer is like a riddle.
Yeah.
And then we disappear in a puff of smoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a riddle that sends you on a quest to find another riddle.
I think it's so funny that Harry's like always too young to find out anything. Like even in book 6, when Dumbledore is telling him all the Voldemort stuff, like even Remus and other people and Arthur are still like, nah, you're too young to like know this stuff. And Molly definitely is like that. And then as soon as we get to Harry being 17, all the adults from his life disappear so that none of them can actually tell him anything.
Yeah.
Because they can't use the excuse of you're too young anymore. He's an adult. Like, let's go. But then they're like, what if we just went camping?
Yeah. Also, like, it's all youngness is relative to how long you think that guy's going to be alive, man.
Dumbledore should be like, he's at 90% of his life right now. I should probably tell him some stuff.
Yeah.
God, like there's like a little, those like things you do for school fun drives where it's like a thermometer and you like color it in as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is like Dumbledore's got one for Harry's life in his back office. Just like, all right.
Oh, no.
He almost got killed this year, but we made it past.
He's sitting there with like a magic eraser, like, oh well, he learned something new, so I better erase a little bit.
These magic.
He learned the Patronus charm. Let's take 10% off for that one.
10% off. Snape's like, damn it.
Learned a second spell.
Yeah, good.
I definitely agree, though, in the comment that there's probably two versions of that letter. That one is for, people who are already in the magical world, and then one is for people who are not in the magical world. And I definitely think, assuming that Harry got the magical one, he should not have. Because just because he is magical and he's not a Muggle born, he was still raised by Muggles. So they definitely should have taken that into account. I guess that's probably pretty unusual. Most wizards are born to wizards or born to Muggles. There's not very many that are born to wizards but are raised by Muggles. So
That is true.
There's but even Voldemort, who was technically born into a wizarding family, but then not really. He was given the Muggle-born version of that letter for sure, because it had that second piece of parchment that told him how to get onto the train, which would be very important to have. But yeah, there's some really good discussion in the comments of this episode on the website. So definitely go and read, because there's a lot of back and forth. Irvin and Absent-Minded Raven get into some real fun side comments, which is pretty great. But there's a lot of really good discussion and comments on this episode. So
very much.
And I think the only thing I'm going to add is there should be a third version of the letter just for the Weasley family, saying another child out of the house.
Everything you read last time, here are your books.
Here are the books.
I feel like we should just start giving them their book. Also, okay, side note on the books thing. Why does Ginny have to get... Well, I guess it's because it's all Lockhart's books that year, but
it's just Lockhart.
She shouldn't have to really get other books ever.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be hand-me-downs.
No one should ever have to buy their books for school.
Period.
Looking at you, colleges.
Period.
Looking at you.
Hard stare.
University system, you can learn something from our podcast.
So our main discussion, horror. Changing Harry Potter into horror. First of all, what's our experience with it?
So yeah, I thought it'd be cool if we very briefly gave a rundown of how experienced we are with horror. Sequoia, since you are our guest, do you want to answer that question first?
Yeah, sure. My experience with horror is that when I was in elementary school, I was at a sleepover and we watched The Ring, and I was like, I hate everything about this and my experience doing this, and I never want to watch a scary movie again in my life, and you can't make me. So I didn't.
And then you made a podcast about it.
Exactly. So So I spent most of my life being like, horror's not for me. And then somehow I let somebody drag me to see the new It movie, the like first of the remakes. And I was like, hey, that ruled so hard. Do I like horror? And started to get into it. And the thing about it is that I was actually really into zombies still, even when I was like, no horror movies for me. I was like, but zombies rule. So there's that. So it was always in me. And I, over the last few years, have just been like kind of catching up. Going back, you know, watching the old like classic stuff, watching the new stuff as it comes out, and being really, I really love it.
Wow.
That is so cool.
That's very similar, actually, to my best friend's experience. Her brother showed her The Ring when she was just way too young for it. And it was like, absolutely not.
Still scary to this day.
What power that movie had over like our generation. Just like it was the scariest movie at the time for a long time.
I have not seen it to this day because of her experience watching it.
Yeah.
Scared me off of ever watching it.
We should do a watch party.
We should.
Yeah.
Patreon content.
There you go.
So I've personally, I think I've seen maybe 3 or 4 horror movies. And the first time I've ever seen one, it was actually my first ever time to America. I was on school exchange to Idaho because that's the place to go, clearly. And I was 16, I want to say 15, 16. And we were watching, I have no idea what it was called. I know that like Mormons featured in it. And it was like about them trying to recruit a family. Even though I was older than you, Sequoia, when I first experienced my first horror movie, I had nightmares for like a week. And I was like, never again. And then I think I've only watched a few more. And one of them being The Woman in Black, because Daniel Radcliffe was in it. And I was like, I want to see this, but also I'm scared.
That's so funny. So never again, but like never again 4 more times.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I hated horror movies for a long time, mostly because, well, I was just chicken, but also because of my friend's experience with The Ring. And also I was pretty sheltered as a kid in terms of like what I could watch and stuff. And so I wasn't allowed to watch anything violent and anything in that vein. And so I didn't for a long, long time. I think in high school, I took a film appreciation class. And so we watched kind of like some of the older ones like Nosferatu and Halloween and things like that. But maybe Friday the 13th too, because I think we did like in the month of October, we just watched a bunch of horror movies and like old school to like semi more recent. And so I kind of was like, okay, maybe some of these aren't so bad. And then in college, for some reason, I got really into thrillers. Like I love a psychological thriller. I prefer that so much over like gore and things like that. I cannot really do gore. I will just say, my husband really likes horror and he has a ton of horror movies. And so every Halloween, he like makes me watch another like batch of horror movies, but I still like, I can't get through like a Saw or something like that. It doesn't like torture and gore. Not for me. I like the suspense and I like the psychological thriller. Like give me Memento 40 times over. But yeah, I can't anything that where like I see knives in, needles in, bones breaking, all that. I'm getting the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. I can't do it, but I love creepy stuff. So that's where I fall in the horror. So like, I don't mind watching a bunch of that, but I definitely have to look away sometimes.
So no Knives In, but you love Knives Out.
Yes.
Hey.
Got him.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny how all of us seem to have the very same experience. So one of the cool things about getting into horror as an adult is realizing that they're not nearly as scary as you thought of when you were a kid. And I think especially like the trailers are always the scariest part of horror movies to me.
Yeah.
Like the actual movie never really lives up to the scariness of the trailer. And so I made a mistake when I was 6 of letting some my cousins talk me into watching Chucky 3.
Oh gosh.
But my sister was like, she's older than me and she was like protective. And so it was like, all right, when I tell you to close your eyes, you have to close your eyes. Which my dad also did when I was 12 and watching Lord of the Rings for the first time, which is not a good way to watch Lord of the Rings. I wasn't allowed to watch the mountain troll, like cave troll scene, which like the noises are way worse than what actually happened. So like my imagination was on fire. But same with
Lord of the Rings, I think I watched it when I was pretty young. My mom tried to show it to me when I was pretty young, and Gollum just freaked the heck out of me. And so I had to like cover my eyes during all the and my ears, like during the Gollum parts. And I'd have to be like, Mom, just tell me when it's over. And she's like, maybe we should wait to watch these. And now they're like my favorite movies, but because how could they not be? But still, that's my like,
claim to fame.
Lord of the Rings is horror.
Yeah, for real. It is. There are definitely horror elements especially that first movie. So I watched Chucky 3, but like only like a third of it and then had nightmares for years about that, which I probably should have just watched the whole thing and then had less nightmares. But then my true, real first horror movie watched all the way through was at a Halloween party in a senior in high school, and we watched Scream, which is a terrible movie to watch as your first horror movie. It's a great movie, but like it goes over all the rules of horror movies and so ruins all previous horror movies for you. And so I was sitting there being like, oh, like taking notes almost like, oh, okay, this is what horror is. Like, but it was such a fun movie. And I was like, oh, that was neat. And then Sierra and I ended up at this very like conservative Christian college. And I somehow you got into it, but I did not.
Yeah.
And it was only recently that I got like started watching them because one of my besties that is really into horror, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a try, and then I absolutely love it. So weird.
You should watch the rest of the Scream movies. They are bangers across the board. I love those movies.
That sounds great. I will do that. My wife has not yet seen Scream, so that's on the list for this Halloween. We got some favorite movies, folks, if you had to choose. It's a tie. Sorry, that's a Hamilton reference. I got to stop those. This is not a Hamilton podcast.
Did you like just recently watch it again or something?
No, we're about to watch Hamlet at my school. And also a bunch of kids have been asking me like, "Oh, is that the musical?" And I'm like, "No."
Oh my gosh.
No.
Yeah, favorites. I have a lot of favorites. I mean, as you can tell from my history, a lot of them are more on the psychological thriller side, but I love The Conjuring, and that vibe. Split is amazing. I don't know how he didn't win awards for his acting in that. James McAvoy is God in that movie, and it's amazing. Cabin in the Woods, just classic. Great subversion. Silence of the Lambs, even so good. Shaun of the Dead, if you want some horror humor. Nosferatu, just as like the classic like vampire that started it all. 10 Cloverfield Lane is great. It's not like Cloverfield. Very, very different. But I think it's better, but that might just be my personal preference of not shaky cam footage. Psycho and Hitchcock, great. I've got a lot. So,
what about you, Sequoia?
Oh, I have so many favorites. Scream, the first Scream movie is one of my favorites. I was a zombie person for a really long time, so 28 Days Later is one of my favorite movies of all time. But I recently watched Train to Busan, and I think it's a better zombie movie.
Ooh,
which
fun.
I thought I would never say. But, and then of course there's like the modern classics like Get Out is one of my favorites, of course, and I really like Us also. I think it's scarier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like that one. But there's been a couple in the last couple of years that have come out that I really loved. So Barbarian last year, really, really, really good. And then this year, Talk to Me, is so good. It's so good. And it like comes out of nowhere because it was like made for an indie studio by like these Australian YouTubers who are like, like prank guys that like blow stuff up or whatever, and then, went to festivals and A24 bought it. And I'm like, well, A24, I trust you.
Yeah,
I trust you to tell me what's going to be good. And I went and saw it, and I was just like, I left like goosebumps all over my whole body. It was so good.
It's amazing how close comedy and horror really are.
Yes.
Like, I think it's Jordan Peele who's quoting somebody else when he says, the difference between horror and comedy is just the music.
Yeah.
And like coming from a comedy king like Jordan Peele, who's now also a horror king, I'm like, all right, I trust you.
I trust, 100%.
Aurelia, what about you? What's your fave?
So since I've not seen as many, I just went with Women in Black because of Daniel Radcliffe, but
fair enough.
A lot of the movies you've listed, I've only heard of, if I've heard of them. So.
Yeah, fair enough.
What about you, Sam?
Yeah, first of all, Women in Black. I haven't seen the movie, but I saw the stage production, and I highly recommend that as a theater experience. I saw it in a particularly strange time for the planet, which was like right when COVID restrictions were being lifted. But downtown San Francisco was still super locked down. So like theater was allowed, but it was a ghost town. And then we went in and it's this little tiny theater. And I had literal front row seats, but they are not the seats that you want in that theater, which is why they were available when I bought them. And so we were just like very close up to the entire experience. And the guy who first started running Women in Black, he's still one of the main actors. So he's been doing it for 30 years. Wow. And it's just such an incredible performance. It's like watching, I think his name is Anthony Daniels, plays C-3PO, where you're just like, whoa. But then you realize that that's kind of what he's been doing for 30, right. Well, I guess now for nearly 50 years. So if Women in Black is playing in your area, I highly recommend it. In that tune, I would also say Sweeney Todd is a big favorite of mine. I count it as horror. I just got to see Josh Groban in New York do it this summer, and I'm going
next month.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited for you. I think I would love to hear your thoughts on it when you see it, but I will let you know that Mrs. Lovett was my favorite part of the show. I thought she stole it.
Sweet.
And I love Josh Groban, and I love the guy who plays Dustin, whose name I forget. Sorry, Dustin. But yeah, I'm so excited for you. It was a great production. I really loved it.
Sweet. That's good to hear.
Sweeney Todd is amazing. My high school did Sweeney Todd when I was a freshman. And
I don't like gore. Oh my God.
No, but the way that they did it was really, it was amazing. And so the guy who played Sweeney when I was a freshman, his name is, I'm going to put him out here. His name is AJ Holmes, and he went on to be the piano player in Star Kid.
Yeah.
and he, he's doing amazing. He was in touring Book of Mormon and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so like I saw him, he was a senior when I was a freshman, and he was Sweeney, and he was phenomenal. And like, honestly, he's like, I've seen a couple productions of Sweeney Todd, but like I haven't seen it in person since then. He's still like my top pick.
Your favorite.
For Sweeney.
AJ Holmes.
Yeah.
Come on the podcast, AJ Holmes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would be really cool. We might still be friends on Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook in a long time.
Shout out to Mark Zuckerberg. Thanks a bunch.
So yeah, but
yeah.
Cool.
I would say my other faves would be, I really loved Zombieland. Silence of the Lamb. I think it's amazing that oh my God, what is his name? Oh my goodness. The main actor. Anthony
Hopkins.
Yeah. I think it's amazing that Anthony Hopkins won an Oscar for 11 minutes of screen time. Like, that's crazy to me.
Wild.
He's so impactful in that movie.
Not the record, but...
What is the record?
I know, which is just... Okay.
I think it's Judi Dench, 8 minutes for Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That
Shakespeare in Love.
Wild. Same as Sierra, I put Psycho, Get Out. Yeah, The Menu, which I really, really loved. I also would say give me Coraline, the Neil Gaiman animated, which I argue is definitely horror.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that would probably be my fave, that and Sweeney. So I have like kind of an eclectic alt. I'm not like classic horror movies, but yeah, Coraline and Sweeney Todd, give it to me. Those are my wins. And then any favorite authors or books? I feel like it's going to be a flat no from Aurelia.
Yep.
Sequoia, what about you?
I haven't read a whole lot of horror, actually. The one I read most recently was Grady Hendrix' How to Sell a Haunted House.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved that. I was like, haunted puppet? Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So, so yeah, that's kind of maybe the only one I've ever read. But I loved it.
Yeah. Sierra?
Yeah. Frankenstein. I mean, I had to read it for school, like sophomore year of high school or something like that. And just, I loved it, considering that I still have yet to get through Dracula. I don't know what it is, but I get like halfway through the book and I can't keep reading it. And I've started over like, I don't know, 6 times. I just can't get through Dracula, but I will read Frankenstein over and over and over. We actually, the year that I did it, we had to read Frankenstein and Pride and Prejudice for summer reading.
Yes.
And it was really funny because Pride and Prejudice, I'd seen the movies a million times because I love them. And so I couldn't read Pride and Prejudice. I had to listen to the audiobook because I just kept picturing. I was like, I know what's happening. Like, I can picture the movie going on in my head, and I was like, I'm bored. So I had to listen to it, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is fun. But yeah, Frankenstein, just amazing. I think I read it 3 times over that summer. So
I just imagine you reading Dracula and going, just stop inviting him inside. It's so easy.
Yeah. On Dracula, they just came out with, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is Dracula, but specifically just the boat scene they made into a whole plot.
Movie? That's
the whole
what that
movie
was?
is just yeah. So they extrapolated him being on the boat as the entire movie. It's got some great actors in it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It hasn't gotten like amazing reviews or anything yet, but I still want to see it because
that's wild. That's super wild, but also hilarious because, like, Dracula on a boat, that's scary. You're with Dracula on a boat?
Yeah. Terrifying.
I don't even have to invite him onto the boat. He can just come onto the boat.
Right.
Yeah.
On the flip side, when the sun comes up, he's screwed.
True.
Just have to survive the night.
Other books, I'm a big fan of Mary Kubica's books, specifically The Good Girl and Don't You Cry. Super good. More psychological kind of thrillery things. I think it's The Good Girl specifically, like, is told from past, future, and present perspective simultaneously. So you're like learning what is going on in like all three different ways, like what happened, what's happening now, and then there's like a mid reveal as well. Very cool. And then I'm a big fan of Joe Hill too, Stephen King's son, who wrote Horns and Nos 4A2. So
I'm not breaking anybody's I'm not blowing anybody's mind when I say Stephen King. I blew my own mind because forever I was like, he can't be that good. He's like putting out books at the same rate as Jodi Picoult and what's his other, you know, when you go and there's like just lists of books from people and you're like, all right, I mean, they're a mass writer, can't be that good. And then I read like one of his most recent books. I forget what it was called, but I was like, he's like good. He like writes well.
There's a reason why everyone's saying he's so good.
That was so surprising to me. And so I read Cujo last year for Halloween. I always try and read horror stuff. Like I'm going to read all the Stranger Things graphic novels this time. And I'm reading Stephen King's fairy tales and all that sort of stuff for the Halloween season. And so I'm like, oh, wow, Stephen King, good author. Who knew? But I would also say I'm a little bit biased here. Tananarive Due, if you've not heard of her, she's an awesome horror author. She was one of my grad school teachers for when I was getting my master's in creative writing. So I got to know her fairly well, and she's given me a lot of great advice. But I also I've read several of her books. I mean, anybody that I work with, whether it's Jim Crusoe, Gary Phillips, or Tananarive Due, I read their books because I like to know what my teachers are like in their writing. And I would really highly recommend anybody to read Ghost Summer, which is a collection of Tananarive's short stories. And her short stories, she has this power and punchiness to such little pages. And so if you were looking for a quick horror read or just something to sit down with, it's phenomenal. Really, any of her books would be really, really good. So yeah, Tananarive Due. Check her out.
So I figured before we fully dive into Harry Potter's horror, let's just quickly recap what makes something horror. And I did the research for this because I clearly know nothing about horror. So you guys jump in. So a definition would be that horror is a genre of literature, film, and television that is meant to scare, startle, shock, or even repulse audiences. The key focus is to elicit a sense of dread in the audience through frightening images, themes, and situations. I think so far so clear.
So far so clear.
Something interesting I found was the etymology. I can never say. Is that how you say that word?
Etymology, indeed. You got it. You nailed it.
Yes. Okay. Of the word horror, which comes from an old French word, horreur. Horreur. I apologize to all the French listeners, which means or meant to shudder or to bristle, which I think is very accurate. Mm-hmm. Or, hide in the next room.
Blanket over the head.
Yeah.
The old French word that means throw the blanket over your head.
Something else I learned during this research, which you two probably know about, is that horror as a genre is often a reflection of the culture and what it fears at the time. So some examples could be invasion, disease, or nuclear testing.
Yeah,
I was definitely not aware of that.
I always think about it in terms of the very famous Batman villain, the Joker, is always doing that. He is always the embodiment of what we fear the most. So, right, Jack Nicholson's was all about Cold War infiltration through all of your daily life products. And then we got Heath Ledger, which was all about terrorism, blowing things up at random, the sort of agent of chaos. So horror does that as well. Like the most popular horror movies are the ones like Get Out, right? Hit the zeitgeist really hard.
Cool. Oh, it's the downside of the camera thing. Us all smiling at each other.
Who's next?
And then the last thing I also learned about, which I'm sure you guys know, is there's sort of typical character types in horror movies. So what I found sort of besides, the killer or the monster or any other threat, so there's like subgenres that have typical character types. For example, the final girl in slasher movies, which I don't think I've seen a slasher movie. So
watch Scream.
Okay.
I'm so confident that will now occur.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are finding yourself as woefully unfamiliar as Aurelia is, then please head to our website and check out the Guide to Horror as written by Aurelia. Check out our website, y'all. And now to the books.
So I think when Sam, you pitched this idea, and I said I would come on this episode as someone who's more new to horror with less knowledge about it. I didn't realize about how many common themes are already in the books that we just needed to twist to make them horror. So, like, is a castle, is haunted, there are ghosts, there are other, like, mythical creatures. It's just sort of like, the story ends well, but if it didn't, or if it were more horrible throughout the way, it could very easily be horror. So I didn't realize this on this week until we started this episode. And then also I had a lot of pleasure turning it into horror, so I'm not sure what that says about me. So it was
I think we've got a new horror fan.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so funny.
Yeah, there's kind of like there's such a thin line between fantasy and horror, because they have a lot of those same elements, and there are like creatures and entities and things that are very common in both spaces. Like, you don't, sometimes you read a romance novel with ghosts in it, but like most of the time you don't read a romance novel with ghosts in it. It's not like a staple of the genre, right? Whereas like you can often find ghosts in fantasy and you often find ghosts in horror. It's just, what is the intent of the thing is what changes it. Yeah.
I think, in terms of like creating Harry Potter into more of a horror instead of just a fantasy with those elements, it is what you said, really. Like, you just need to dial everything up. Like, everything just needs to be pushed a little bit farther, and then you have it. You would have generally like a darker theme overall. The first few books are still pretty cheerful and happy, no matter, even if people are being petrified. But it's generally like a little bit happier of a tone. So you would just dial that down and then focus more on, the supernatural and magical elements of the world. You've got ghosts and poltergeists and things already. Maybe Peeves is not just kind of a jerk. He is actually like devilish and is out to harm people.
He even in canon throws stuff at people, which could be quite dangerous.
True.
But then again,
it's like
I like to point out that they play a game with cannonballs on the loose, on brooms in the air. So, safety.
That's true. Yeah.
No safer place than Hogwarts.
Yeah, and then like any time that the death begins, in it, it would you just ramp it up more significantly. The dread of the next death would become much more palpable. You'd have a little more of that anticipation. Everything is a little bit less hopeful, a little bit less positive as it goes along. You'd have, just being more like in dread of the next thing instead of like, all right, well, we handled that last one. We can definitely handle whatever comes next. It would be more like, we barely escaped. We're definitely dead next time. That kind of vibe. And, I think in general, like Harry and company they would still probably be, the heroes, the ones left to tell the tale of what happened to everyone else. But, depending on what kind of genre of horror we're talking about, maybe not all of them survive. Probably not all of them survive. If it's a slasher movie, only Hermione's coming out of that one as like the one girl,
the final girl who is more innocent and didn't, go and sleep with someone before the movie started, whatever.
Damn it, Ginny.
Yeah. So, if it's a psychological thriller, Harry is going to be the only one who survives, but he's going to be irrevocably altered. Everything wasn't as it always appeared. Maybe he never left his cupboard. I've seen fanfics about that one. So,
yeah.
I think that there's definitely like a lot that can be done just making those little tweaks. And then you have, Horror Infinite in there.
Yeah, I like that fan theory. It was for a while now. It's sort of a fan canon of Harry wakes up at the end of book 7 and it's like he's still in his cupboard and it was all sort of in his head. It was a dream.
Yeah.
But like you could dial that up and he's like in some sort of institution and he's been, like old time treated with like electrotherapy, where it could go really dark. Especially
Very
like if the story is also less uplifting that he's experienced and then he wakes up.
Very Smallville season 3, which is a thing for like 3 people to understand.
That's a deep cut. That is a deep cut.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever seen Smallville, season 3 is all horror, baby. Like they just were like, what if we turn this into horror? And I was like,
I honestly think season 3 is the only season of Smallville.
Well, it's the only one worth watching.
Wow.
Turns out superhero soap opera is not the best thing in the world. Yeah, I think Sierra, you nailed it with like the Harry's role is the one left to tell the tale, which starts out by him being orphaned.
Yeah,
and it's so easy. It's so easy to turn fantasy into horror. The Basilisk, the Acromanculus, the Dementors, the Inferi. We've got the deranged Bellatrix, Peter, Sirius. We've got ghosts and death, like the Resurrection Stone, the Arch. And I think we were talking about Lord of the Rings for a second. We go from the Shire with these very cute, lovely party and celebrations, and then we get to the Prancing Pony, and it's like, oh, this is an adventure. And we get the second breakfast scene while mosquitoes are surrounding them, and then suddenly we're in the Mines of Moria, and that's like straight up horror elements right there. They do the trying to make some sort of ease on the watcher by doing that huge like micro level out where we're staring down as they run, because the horror movie would have you right there, right? It would put you right in the middle of that run.
Yeah, you could hear everybody breathing. Like it would be There's so much to that, like that idea of like. 2 things, I think. First, I love that, like, the difference between you being able to understand, like, the fullness of it and that, like, okay, we get the feeling that they're probably going to make it out of this portion alive because it's portioned out. It's like, scary portion, and then they get to, like, a rest, and then, scary portion. And I think that, like, takes away from some of the tension building that, like, if you can feel the segmentation of it, then you're less scared for them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think it's that camera shift, that point of view, And the intention of it is so clear. Because, like, the intention isn't to really scare the audience. It's to show the danger that the fellowship is in, right? Same with in Chamber of Secrets, I feel like they really nail two moments of horror. Like, when the basilisk, there's the jump scare, of course, that everyone remembers from, like, the trailer. And then, of course, there's that other trailer moment where the basilisk is coming up to Harry as he's sort of pinned against the bars. Like, that's a very horror element. And then, of course, the, like, entire spider chase scene is very, like, horror moment-y. And I think Prisoner of Azkaban, they do such a good job with bringing in the horror elements to it. But again, it's to, like, give context and emotional context and visual aesthetic. It's not, the intention isn't to scare your audience. Mainly because they want children watching them, and horror movies and children don't really mix as much.
Tell that to Goosebumps.
Yeah, but like Goosebumps, everyone pretty much lives. There's like one death.
True. This is true, but like, they're scary.
6-year-old Sierra has made an appearance on the podcast.
No, I'm talking 5th grade Sierra. Fifth grade Sierra. I read all the books that I had, and Goosebumps was the only thing left on the shelf for silent reading time. And then I was sitting there like, ah.
You and I had a very similar upbringing.
We really did.
I think one of the biggest differences, like now that we're talking about it, between this sort of fantasy and the horror is like fantasy is more likely to have like several bad things, right? So like we're worried about Voldemort, we're worried about the basilisk, we're worried about the acromantula, you know, like there's a whole bunch. So you can have like an interlude with this bad thing, an interlude with this scary thing, an interlude with this scary thing. Whereas usually in a horror movie, there would be like one. And the whole thing would be about, you know, you're in the forest, you can't find a way out of the forest, and you're dealing with these giant spiders. So that it's not segmented out in that way. So I think that like as far as like hurdles are concerned, because it seems, you know, you look at it and you're like, yeah, turning this into horror, like all the elements are there. All the elements are there for you. Right. But the hurdle is maybe too many elements.
Right.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I had not thought about the, like, you have to parse down into a sort of a more focused, because that is the good thing about horror, right? Is like you get down and it starts to rattle you and you start to feel ill at ease, versus in the Potter books, you never really are with an element too long to really be like, oh my God, what is going to happen?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the time, the horror movie isn't like a hero's journey style storytelling. So it's not about, you know, the knight pulling out a sword and battling the evil. It's about the evil hunting you. The evil has the power, you don't. And you don't know what it is. So like, how can you get the power? That's the whole mystery element of horror, is like, how do I get the power to defeat the thing that is bad?
Yeah. And that's why I think Chamber of Secrets is the most horror-y of all of the stories, is because we have the moment of these petrifications keep happening. The power dynamic is lost. The teachers don't know what's going on. Harry doesn't really know what's going on. He's got parcel tongue, but he doesn't recognize what's happening. And then
then Dumbledore is sent away as well.
Yeah. And so like you are focused in on these, I think it's 3 different occurrences, right? It's Mrs. Norris, Justin Fitzfutchley, Penelope Clearwater, and Hermione.
And
I feel like I'm missing one more. Colin Creevey, yeah. So, but it's still, you never really sink your teeth into how horrible these petrifications are.
Because like you said, the camera's not with the person being petrified. Yeah. If you're with the person peeking around the corner with a mirror, that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very. And I think I will see that. You'll see it's really hard. We're about to go through all the different books and say how they can change into horror. And so much of it is POV change.
Yeah.
Like you have to do the POV change in order to make it horrific. So without a further ado,
let's jump right in.
The Philosopher's Stone.
Yes. My argument is that the type of horror that this would be best as is a supernatural horror. You just really dive into the ghosts. You have the Death Day party. You have Peeves being much more malicious instead of playful. You get Grey Lady and the Bloody Baron's history. You can like weave all of that in to like really make ghosts the focus of what's going on. You can just, you can keep Voldemort possessing Quirrell, turn that slightly more into like ghost possession, have that be more of a theme. You could keep it pretty similar because he is supposed to be dead, but he's living on. So, the Horcruxes being, it could have more of a heavy shadow of Horcruxes, how Voldemort is dead but not gone, and really like focus in on the ghosts and what they're doing. You just make everything a little bit more malicious and have the ghosts like possessing people or focusing in, and you tie it back to Voldemort. Maybe he's the one causing these ghosts to go from the Fat Friar who's so jovial and happy, and then he becomes twisted and how that happens. You just really lean into that. And then the mystery that we've been talking about, the mystery is what is happening to these ghosts that are usually so pleasant to make them this way. And so I that's my argument, is that this would work really well as like a supernatural horror.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like that. I'm sort of stuck after we need to get Harry to Hogwarts first. Because once we're at Hogwarts, love that piece. But then I'm almost sort of there thinking, if we make the Dursley time worse, which hard to do, but not impossible. And there's this like slight slimmer of hope. He gets to Hogwarts, and then Hogwarts is not actually better. Like, because Hogwarts often for Harry is like, it's his home.
Right.
So we need to almost immediately destroy that.
Right.
And then you could, I'm not sure if we want to take away his friends, but maybe.
Yeah, because you
I
kind of
enjoy
like
this too much.
you kind of have to give it like really harsh like daytime versus nighttime like vibes, where like maybe daytime is that like glimmer of hope where like everything seems like shiny and happy and cool, and maybe it is that like Harry is the only one that's noticing that the ghosts are changing and things are getting bad, and everybody else is just kind of like oblivious to what's happening, because it is that is what is happening in the book, right? It's like Harry and Ron and Hermione know something is bad, so, like know what's going on, and nobody else knows what's going on. So you could give it a little bit of that. I think it'd be fun to be like, you sort of have to put everybody in mortal danger in a way that I think is difficult, the way that the book is structured, because Voldemort in the book is not going after Harry in book one. He's going for the stone. And you kind of have to just change that.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we could tie in, Aurelius' whole Dursley, like kind of that mental torture and all that, if you kind of add in ghosts early on. So maybe Harry always sees ghosts. Maybe it's not something that's just because he's a wizard at Hogwarts and that's when they appear. Maybe he's always seen them because he almost died. And so he's like, kind of one foot through the veil, he can see them. And then that could be a reason that the Dursleys are worse to him, because talking to ghosts would be even worse than talking to snakes. And, the Dursleys seeing things that are even more abnormal with him would create them to act even worse. And kind of that could all spiral in. So you get that. And then he thinks he's being whisked away to this place that's going to alleviate. Well, maybe I'll have an explanation as to why I can see ghosts. Well, maybe, I'll never have to go back to the Dursleys. And then all this stuff keeps happening with the ghosts at school, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so there's no alleviation, maybe a brief, the first few weeks, a brief little lightening of the situation before everything starts turning dark again. You could tie those in.
I love this idea of Harry being touched by death as being something that adds to his power. And it's not just like the soul bit and the Horcrux, but like the veil as being a bit of him. That's a really neat idea. Something fun to play around with. I went sort of in a very different direction, which was like, how do we take the elements that are there and make them horror rather than changing the scope of the story? And so I changed like bits and pieces in my mind. I think the castle isn't nearly as warm, and we have almost more of a like series of unfortunate event approach to school where things are just dreary all the time. I wonder if there's like something to play around with in terms of like, you really can't be out of your dormitory at night because
oh yeah.
There's a great book. What is it called? A Deadly Education, which if you haven't read is a horror magic school book. It is a great story and I highly recommend it to everyone, but there are monsters that are attracted to the only magic school in the entire area. And so because magic exists there and they have to feed off the magic, oftentimes students who go and live there have to bond together and fight off monsters, and they're constantly on the verge of death. But at night, the school has a safety system that it sets everything on fire to kind of clear the house. So if you're in the hallways, you are dead. And I'm like, that sort of element, I feel like there's gotta be something there with the way the Hogwarts works as well. I think, I honestly think like in actuality, if this book was published, it'd be much more like the Goosebumps variety. Like we get the happy ending. There are scary things, but it's not too scary.
Right.
I think like we don't get Fluffy, right? You don't get the 3-headed dog named Fluffy. You get maybe something like a Luison, which is like a Spanish Portuguese dog. And it's like an extremely ugly giant dog hell-bent on protecting the stone. I think the gauntlet to get down to the Sorcerer's Stone is way scarier, right? Devil's Stare, the keys, the troll, the potions, they're all more ferocious. As is the troll that I feel like absolutely kills several children before Harry, Ron, and Hermione stop it. This is going to be a trigger warning for the rest of the episode. There's going to be a lot of under 18-year-olds dying. So
yeah.
Noted. We're in the horror podcast. I think my big what if, like if we're doing the Marvel thing of like, what if, my horror what if is like, what if the Mirror of Erised traps those who gaze upon it too much? A sort of reverse as to how Dumbledore uses the stone, and that it kind of plops out if you don't want to use it. And so like Harry's and Ron's glimpse into the mirror is quite addictive, so much that Dumbledore has to physically intervene. And then Harry has those nightmares, which are more prevalent than facing Voldemort. He's scared to face the mirror again after being almost consumed by it. And then, of course, that sets up this very frightening, like, Quirrell, get away from the mirror. Quirrell, get away from the mirror. Oh, my God, you're Voldemort. No, the mirror is still the more entire thing. And then Quirrell is consumed, Voldemort flees, and Harry survives somehow. But, like, that to me is, like, the big what if the Mirror of Erised is the real horror element here?
I like that.
That would be so interesting.
Can we like trademark all of this?
TN.
Yeah, I think those are all great interpretations. And now we're moving on to Chamber. So, Sierra, you have something
Sequoia's
here about love.
my favorite book.
Yeah,
Historically my favorite book.
Let's change it to horror, people.
I know. If you change it, maybe if we do this change, then maybe it'll become your favorite.
Yeah.
Won't be as ruined by the fourth.
So I had two kind of ideas here, and I'm not sure that they would work in tandem, but I had two ideas on kind of like the genre that Chamber would be. I'm thinking Lovecraftian with the basilisk.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that nobody understands and is like bigger than all of us and all of that, those elements. However, I started thinking about what if it was a found footage from Ginny's perspective. It would be really interesting, especially if you didn't know that it was Ginny until the camera is focused on her lying in the chamber. Or the camera's passed between different people, and sometimes you see the horrible things and the basilisk, like, not necessarily see the basilisk, but see the result from that perspective, kind of how we were talking about. If you just change the point of view to the person being petrified, then it changes everything. So, you know, maybe the camera is passing between all these people and you're introduced to all these characters and you don't know which one is behind it until it is passed to Ginny's perspective, and then she collapses, and the sideways camera shot of her laying in the chamber, and you see that it's Ginny this whole time. So that was super interesting to me, to like kind of keep that Lovecraftian feel, but then have it be in a found footage style, because it gives you that from the perspective of the person, sitting there as, Hermione hands Penelope Clearwater the camera and says, okay, we're going to use this mirror to look behind the corner. Colin Creevey had the camera, and that is how he was petrified. And then they recover the camera, they add the new film, and they move on to the next person type of thing would just be interesting. The camera, because Colin already has the camera in canon, that's an easy, he shows up with it. As soon as he is petrified, everybody else is like, well, now we got to have footage of what's happening here. And then it continues on from there. So that was my kind of thought on what theme it would, or what genre of
it's interesting because
be.
the book would have to start from Colin Creevey's perspective, because that's the person who has the camera, and then the story really picks up after he's petrified, which is really cool.
Yeah,
I like that a lot, and I like also the idea that there has to be an inciting moment that happens off camera, like previous to movie, in order to make it so that they're making the footage. They have to be exactly. So I think that gives some fun stuff to play with as far as who lives, who dies. Because I also think you can't have it just be a bunch of kids get petrified. That's not
no, they would have
enough.
to die instead.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I would think that maybe the first thing that happens is somebody gets petrified, and then Colin picks up the camera. He's going to figure this out himself, something, and then it starts getting passed. Passed like that. I think that's really cool. Yeah.
So the thing that I wanted to add was a lot of that book is the school hating on Harry because of the parcel tongue incident. So I think in this version he would be even more of an outcast. And it would have to be more extreme, potentially going so far that he will actually die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I love that idea because, he could die, or at least he tries to well, I'm going to, try to figure out what this is, and I'm okay to die. But then, assuming we're keeping it as a series and we need him to still be a main character, he could attempt to die. Oh, that's true. But he could attempt to die, but the Horcrux element keeps him alive. But everyone thinks that he's dead, and then, figures out that it's been Ginny this whole time and not Harry. And then everybody feels really bad. And then he's back and everybody's kind of why are you back? And then that could be another suspicion of Harry throughout the rest, is he didn't die and he definitely should have.
Does that mean we destroyed two Horcruxes, Diary and Harry Horcrux?
Yeah, I think so.
That could speed up the rest of the story.
It's true. Now we only need him to go to book 3. It's amazing to me how Chamber of Secrets sort of has to be rated R as a movie if we're going full horror. If you keep all the elements in, because it's quite scary for children. There's this giant snake going around, and I think so my biggest irrational fear is being eaten alive whole. That sounds just terrifying.
Terrible.
So, what is it? The second Pirates of the Caribbean movie with the Kraken really freaked me out, and I think it's led exactly to that fear. So when I do my whole rundown of what I think the story will be later on in the pod, you'll just see there's a lot of people being eaten. I think the story, you could make it stay roughly the same, but I love this idea of the POV switching. What I'll do in the rundown is like the perspective is from the person who's wielding Tom's diary. So it's Ginny for a long time, and then it switches to Harry for a brief bit. But it's also Lucius's, right, at the beginning, so you get a little bit more of that Dobby stuff at the beginning without having to see it from Harry's perspective. Obviously, I think there would be a lot more scariness about the Acromantula, right? There are entombed bodies in the web still of students and centaurs and unicorns spun and strewn about their area. There are many more students and staff deaths by being like slurped down whole by the basilisk. I feel like Draco on his mission to aid the heir of Slytherin would get like Goyle eaten by the basilisk. And my big what if is like, what if Ron doesn't survive the questioning of Aragog?
Yeah, I was going to suggest someone has to die with the Acromantula. So I was like, what would have to be Ron? I think it has to be Ron.
Right. That is his biggest fear.
Yeah. Killing off Ron early. Yeah, I would say as far as like the perspective switching is concerned, just from like a coolness factor, it would be fun if it was like the perspective was not Ginny's until the end.
Yeah.
Because she would just be like popping up in the background of other people's footage. Just, I don't know, acting a little sus or be in places that she shouldn't be, or just sort of always being around when something bad is happening.
Yeah, from the victim's perspective right before, like if she is somewhere in the background. Because I also love the idea of like seeing Harry's torture from the student's perspective. Like, as he's being like left out and thought that he's the person and everything, sort of being from a distance as well. Yeah, I love that. I love sort of not having Ginny and Harry's stories being told through other people.
Yeah.
Who are also in deep doo-doo with the basilisk. All right, Prisoner, here we go. What's up with that?
I think
What's up with that?
Obviously a werewolf horror.
Yeah.
It's gotta be.
It's gotta be. Yeah, there's not really any other options. I think there's two ways to do it. You either make Lupin a villain, and he is just a bad werewolf, and that is the story. Or you make him a redeemable werewolf by introducing Fenrir Greyback here and have his whole backstory of how he turned Lupin as a child and all that, and have him be the true villain, which I think, my personal opinion, he is way more terrifying as a villain than the books or the movies definitely make him out to be. He is absolutely horrifying. If you really think about who he is and what he's done and what his motivations are, absolutely horrifying. I think he's a perfect, like, true villain for this movie. For this book, everything. And then you have kind of both tropes. You have the misunderstood monster and you have the irredeemable monster.
Yeah.
So, you have everybody suspects that it's Lupin because of all the hints and the things, and it turns out, like, he's really trying to stop Greyback because of their history. Like, and then you get that reveal of, like, everything that's been going on. You get a lot of people disfigured, a lot of people turned into werewolves, a lot of people who, like, are being killed. You get the whole gambit, because he's really just out.
I love,
for blood and for torture and all of that. So I think it is very easy to just make Fenrir villain beyond villain in his werewolf form, because he already is.
And we love a red herring. So, like, Lupin as a red herring for Fenrir Greyback is fun.
Super good.
Yeah.
The only thing I had to add was silly. So, and I blame Sequoia, because I listened to it was a 6-year anniversary episode.
Yes.
And was it Kim who brought out a Twilight fanfic?
It was. It was, in fact.
My memory, like, basically was like, oh yeah, Twilight is a thing that existed. So it's now sort of fresh in my head. So when I saw your idea about the werewolf dialing up the werewolf trope, I was like, ooh, but we need vampires, because my brain was now werewolf and vampires only come together. So and I know
and it's Snape.
Yeah, in the early books, Snape is often sort of compared to a vampire. So like there is a bit of something there. So I was thinking, if we were to do houses differently and there were houses by sort of type of supernatural something, what if the Slytherins are all vampires? What if the Gryffindors are all sort of some sort of other shapeshifters like werewolves? Because a lot of the animagus people that we do meet are Gryffindors.
True.
Yeah. True. Very true.
So yeah, it's not super horror.
I almost wonder, like, I almost wonder if Lupin is a red herring for Snape.
Yeah.
In that context.
Yeah. I was convinced of that as soon as Snape, on my first read of Prisoner of Azkaban, I was convinced that Snape was going to be the actual true bad guy when he steps in the Shrieking Shack. It's really funny to me how much Prisoner, it was just like Kids Bop horror. Like I really feel, especially when we get into those final scenes with like the Whomping Willow and like the cat, which like cats always sort of have this mysterious helpful, like if you think about like, say, what's his name in Hocus Pocus, right? Or like Salem from Sabrina. There's all of these great little cats who are helpful characters in sort of Kids Bop scary movies. I also feel like in this movie book thing, we see what it's like to be kissed. We actually see it happen to a minor character, right?
Yeah.
Like someone like Seamus or Dean or Lavender or Colin Creevey, maybe Percy gets kissed on school grounds, and it's all hushed up by the Ministry because of course Fudge would do that, right? Like he would be like, oh no, these are my, like, we have to have these for Azkaban, I'm so sorry, like, but this is under the rug, like I'm leaning on the prophet not to say anything, all that sort of stuff. And then my big what if, like, you stole it, Sierra, before I could write it down. What if Remus and Sirius were the actual villains? And I like the idea that we still get the same story, right? They convince Harry that no, it was Peter who did it all along. We got to kill him. I'm actually your godfather. I didn't betray them. We switched him to Secret Keeper. And so then they kill Peter and then they turn on Harry and Ron and Hermione.
Oh.
And I think
Ron's
that
dead. We killed him in chamber.
Yeah, remember Ron's dead.
Well, assuming Ron's here, because we need Scabbers to be in the story.
Dean has replaced him.
And taken his family
and
rat.
taken his rat, too. Yeah.
Or Ginny. He just got passed down to Ginny.
Okay, sure. So now Ginny's part of the trio. And so now these three turn on him. And then I think like Snape actually gets a hero moment there, right? As he comes in to actually help to save the day, and that changes Harry's and Hermione's and Ginny's relationship. So that was my big what if. It was like, what if we get the same story, but then they actually turn as soon as they kill Peter?
Interesting.
Right. I think it's interesting because like if you're making it, you know, a werewolf or vampire type experience, you have to have a death toll that the book doesn't have.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have anything close to. Like, I feel like the first couple, you know, you could sort of like see where those were coming from, but these would have to be entirely fabricated, you know, sort of from nothing deaths. But I like that.
Yeah.
Well, it could even start in Hogsmeade, because this is also where we
get there for the first time.
Are getting into Hogsmeade for the first time. So the deaths begin in Hogsmeade and then move to Hogwarts.
Yeah.
So that would kind of like increase the anticipation. That would make Hogsmeade a more dangerous place to visit, which like would, instead of just, oh, there's a guy out there and he might get into the only wizarding settlement in Britain and somehow kill you in front of everybody because he did that before.
We'd have to get, you know, there's that scene where Ron sees Sirius above him holding the knife about to kill Peter. We wouldn't be able to see Sirius to get to this moment of like, oh, I'm actually good, because Harry would never believe him. But imagine like waking up in the middle of the night and like half of Gryffindor Tower has been murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's terrifying.
Anybody who was in the common room, like he got into the common room and killed everybody, but anybody who was in their dorm, he didn't make it up the stairs or something.
Several dead house elves.
Yeah,
and only the boys, because Sirius
I was just gonna say only the boys because they can't.
I mean, unless he gets a broom and flies up, like that is not a foolproof way of blocking the stairs.
Stop.
Oh no, it's a slide. I wonder if I could fly somehow. Oh man. Goblet of Fire.
Goblet of Fire.
And the way everyone started this series.
Yeah. Welcome, Sequoia.
This one is a hard one for me. I thought about this one for a really long time. I actually skipped Goblet of Fire and went down and did other ones and came back because I wasn't really sure, but I think I've settled on going slasher. So there isn't too much death, obviously. This is another one where you'd have to totally fabricate a lot of death. But it would be easy to kill off a bunch of
new schools in to kill people off.
Yeah, exactly. You have all these other extra people that you can kill off for plot reasons. And so I think in typical slasher fashion, you would have to have it be normal until the Yule Ball. All the hormones start raging, all the people start hooking up, slasher happens.
I love that. I love the Yule Ball being the moment. Yeah.
All the death starts happening because of that. Because in slasher, it's usually, all the hormones and then the slashing begins. So I think that's where it is. You can still have Bardi Moody being key villain. He's upset. All these kids have gotten to experience all these things, and he's still working for Voldemort, and he now is just going to, instead of just get Harry, he's going to take out his rage on all of the kids who are getting to experience these amazing things that he didn't get to because he joined Voldemort at such a young age, and then has spent all of his life in Azkaban up until now, or under the control of his father. All of that can stay the same. His history, it makes for a pretty good, can still make for a pretty good villain. You just notch it up a little bit. He's tortured. His father was not just keeping him under house arrest, but also et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think, the maze can stay very similarly to how it is either in the book or in the movie.
I think a mix. You'd have to do a mix.
Yeah, a mix. Yeah. But ramping up, they're being stalked in this maze. They know that there's someone, because they do, because Crumb does get Imperious and is attacks Fleur and attacks Cedric. You keep all of that and just, you really amp it up from we're being stalked, we are being pursued. And then, right before Harry gets whisked away, maybe instead of Cedric dying in the graveyard, Bardi, he's the last kill right before Harry's whisked away into the graveyard. And he sees who it is. And that's maybe the first vision.
Right before the port key. Yeah.
Right before the port key. And that's the first vision. The graveyard could almost stay the same if you're keeping this obviously in the same realm and not completely changing the plot line. But I don't know. I feel like it would leave the slasher element at that point. I feel like the slasher theme is done as soon as you leave Bardi's presence.
I'm in the same mind frame that I think Bardi has to be sort of the main villain of this, and Voldemort's return is not so much the climax as it is, because so much of Goblet of Fire is giant red herring the entire time of we have no idea, and then suddenly you're whisked away and it's oh I see. But in a slasher movie, you have to have your main villain present throughout.
Yeah, right. I think also one of the things that's a little bit unbelievable about the book is that nobody figures out what's going on with Mad-Eye Moody. That feels like that's not true.
It's because Dumbledore's on Dragonclaw the entire book. He's just high out of his mind.
Yeah.
Just let the kid play.
Bizarre that nobody saw anything at any point, So we know that Bardi was stealing from Snape's stores, you know, and like we know, like there was things he was doing where he could have been caught or seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel like he's killing people because they're on to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the deaths maybe seem really random, like a Hogwarts teacher, a Durmstrang student, you know, like it just like it seems like there's no rhyme or reason to the people who are being killed. And that's what's difficult about the mystery, is that it like hinges upon the second mystery, which is how did Harry get his name in the Goblet of Fire?
Yeah.
Okay, Ludo Bagman has to have a much bigger part in this. Okay, because he is kind of a red herring throughout the book.
Yeah.
Like, he's completely cut out of the movie, does not exist in movie canon. But in the book, you know, he's a big red herring because you're like, what is going on with him? And like, you have the whole Fred and George thing. And yeah, like, I think it's one of those ones where they're like, okay, we think we figured out who it is. It's Ludo, and then he's dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's like, oh, that was our last guess. Like, we've gone through everybody. That's our last guess. And now he's gone. And then you get the maze and all of that. And I think that happens right before the last task.
Wait, I've fixed my Ron isn't here mode. He's definitely a ghost. And that's why.
Ooh.
And so he's here to be like, wait, if it's not Ludo, then who the hell was it? I need Ron to deliver that line. Sorry, Aurelia, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm almost like thinking maybe Ludo dies just before the third task, but no one knows yet that was the wrong guy.
Oh,
everyone's sort of like, oh, now we're
good.
safe. And then we're going into the maze.
I
Now we can
love
continue.
but now we're safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's so
I like
good.
that a lot.
Yeah.
We need to write those books.
Yeah, for real. All we got to do is change the names. That's how Twilight got made. Or not how Twilight. That's how 50 Shades got
50
made.
Shades of Grey.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting. The graveyard scene, if you keep it, I feel like is a natural inclination for inferior zombie stuff. But I also, it's like so cliche and it's so readily available that I'm sort of like, I'm bored. I think you make the tasks way scarier and almost a Hunger Games-esque type of situation where you're fabricating more people in there. So, right, like there's supposed to be 4 Hogwarts champions, 1 from each house, and Harry just gets substituted in for Ravenclaw, pissing off all of Ravenclaw. So you get Cedric, and like I don't remember who's an actual 7th year, so I put Marcus Flint in there. I think it's wrong. And then like Angelina Johnson. So it's Harry, Cedric, Angelina, and Marcus Flint. But like you're just seeing all these kids from Durmstrang and Beauxbaton die during it. So like we see like Marcus Flint burned alive and then eaten. We see the Angelina drowned by the mer people and like eaten by the Kelpies or the squid or something. Hagrid gets fired during this one because a blast-ended screw like consumes Pansy Parkinson.
Bye, Pansy.
And then like we get like some sort of chase scene with the Sphinx or like that being stalked by Crumb. And like, there's another Acromantula and another Blast-ended Scroot in the maze. So like what happens to Fleur and Crumb? But I think all of these end up being linked in my what if is like, what if Barty Crouch was a serial killer at Hogwarts? Mm-hmm. So it starts out with him just trying to plan for Voldemort, but then like people start to get like Sequoia was talking about, people start to understand like, oh, hey, what's going on? And then suddenly they're dead. But then also like all the killing, he just starts to go more insane himself. And it becomes all of these accidents, right? All these creatures around are actually being used to clean up his mess, right? So he kills them, but maybe there's a clue left behind and now they have to be fed. Right, he needs them to completely disappear. And I think we see a lot of
he's still trying to get Harry to win the thing. So if there's even more competitors, then he wants to be picking those guys off.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And so like that's why we see Harry comes across the people as they're dying or as they're being like, lifted away from the situation to go be consumed or whatever, or like Angelina as she like floats down to the bottom of the lake. And so we see these horror elements through the like, damn it, they're at the last second again. I'm not quite on time. And I think that becomes a very terrifying version of the Triwizard Tournament.
Yeah.
If we were to stick with the zombie bit for once we're at the graveyard, what if the whole all of the people that Buddy kills then try to be turned into Voldemort's army?
Yeah, that's terrifying.
He's been transporting
and
all
now
the bodies.
we have to go up against our friends.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's something more terrifying than the portkey, where as you get towards the center of the maze, instead of the cup, you transition into the graveyard. Like, it's like just walking through as if there's no barrier. And so, like, all of the people who have been killed, Barty is able to put into the graveyard so that they do become those terrifying inferior.
Like, instead of the mist that turns everything upside down, the mist, as you walk through it, transports you
into the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I think is scarier than being like, oh no!
Yeah.
Right.
For those of you who can't see what I just did, I grabbed the cup and then was thrown into the graveyard. It's an audio medium, Sam. Let's go. Order of the Phoenix. This one I feel like is right up your alley for psychological thrillers, Sierra.
Heck yeah. Already it's a psychological thriller. Let's be real. What is real? What's only in Harry's head? What is actually Voldemort acting through Harry? What is Harry imagining? He thinks he's a snake somehow. What is what is actually going on? This is very like Memento-y. I'm getting flashes of this, flashes of that. I don't know how it all pieces together. Once someone is in your mind, how do you get them out? Really ramp up legilimency, occlumency. People are in each other's brains a lot in this book. And you just really ramp that up of like, if someone is in your head, how do you know what is you and what is them and what they're making you remember versus what you're actually remembering? All of that. You could almost like move the memory. Oh my gosh! All my brain just evaporated. you could almost move Slughorn's memory into this. Of like, if you can tamper with your own memories, and someone else can tamper with yours, and what you think is real with the whole Sirius memory or like the whole Sirius vision being implanted. Like, you just really ramp that all up. I think you could almost keep most things the same.
almost everything of the main points of this book I feel like can be kept if you make this a psychological thriller.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I added to it is I made Harry be more lonely, so he would lose his friends throughout this because he's questioning so much of what is going on that they just get fed up with him. I mean, caps lock Harry anyway.
Right.
But then also if the rift between him and Sirius gets even bigger, and he doesn't have Sirius either. So, and Dumbledore doesn't talk to him. So like, just make him truly feel alone and having to deal with everything.
Well,
Definitely.
that can almost be like a Dumbledore design, right? Like he's already designed to not see Harry himself because he thinks Voldemort's in his head. So what if he is specifically creating circumstances that separates Harry out until he can figure out a way to stop this? Which is weird that even in the actual Order of the Phoenix, it's weird that Dumbledore isn't like, I think Voldemort might be in Harry's head. Let's teach him occlumency immediately. He's just like, I'll just ignore the kid. It'll be fine. Like,
yeah.
I know the best teacher, Snape.
I think you'd have to turn up like what it feels like what visually it is interpreted, like what it feels like to have somebody in your head. And so like maybe the beginning, it's more clear what is real and what's not real and what's a memory and what's not. And it becomes increasingly less clear as Harry becomes increasingly more isolated. That gives you a good ramp.
Yeah. In a visual, assuming this is a movie, you could do a lot of that by playing with, usually when there's like a memory, things are a little bit hazy or there's like a film over things. And so it could even be later on as things are more uncertain. It's fading in and out of that visual. And so you're like, wait, I thought this was a memory. Maybe it's not. I thought this was real. Maybe it's not. And it's fading in and out according to Harry's own uncertainty with what is real and what is not.
Yeah.
I think Harry has to commit a murder in this one.
I agree. I agree.
Definitely.
So I was thinking that the beginning of the story could be almost like if you've seen The Last Night in Soho, which is a horror movie that was, I think, 2022. It's a visually incredible movie. It's a little bit of a letdown, but the Phelps twins are in it, and they're in it for a scene, and I really like that scene. But in that movie, this girl has the sort of ability to see dead people, and so when she rents an old flat in London, she starts to live the life of a girl in the 1960s, which she's obsessed with that era. She's a fashion designer. She's trying to become big, and she loves that era, and so it sort of shows you the horrors of being a woman trying to make a life in London in the 1960s. And I think like you get a little bit of that here at the beginning of the movie, where it's like we're getting backstory for Voldemort now instead of book 6, where it's Harry is living through Voldemort's life until we get that Arthur Nagini moment, and Voldemort starts to realize. And this turns into like a play on creating illusions and falsities in Harry's mind, where he begins to go insane. Like he's not able to see or tell what's real. And so Harry is like attacking students because he believes he's like back in the maze, or like, and so like Harry, I think he does commit a murder, and he ends up in St. Mungo's, and from being in St. Mungo's, it's very easy to get Harry out of there at night through false ideas that Voldemort is planting to get him to the Hall of Prophecy. So he's not there because of Sirius, he's there because Voldemort is playing with his mind. And I think, you know, it's very much like that scene in Order of the Phoenix, the movie, where Harry sees himself as Voldemort in the bathroom, and he's like seeing him on King's Cross. I think that's sort of the vibe that we're going for. And I think the Department of Mysteries is way scarier, right? Like maybe his friends come to visit him in St. Mungo's and he's not there, and they go looking for him. And he's got like his location turned on his iPhone, so they know exactly where to go. And like, I think Neville dies, right? I think like this is a bit on the nose, but like, it's all about the mind. I think those brains actually kill someone. It's not just Ron getting wrapped up in thought. It's Neville dies. And I think my biggest what if for this one is, what if the Order of the Phoenix turns on Harry? That when they think he's being possessed, that it's actually now, this is entirely different from what I've just said. When Harry, they think he's being possessed, everyone turns on him and they think they have to hunt him down. And now it's Harry, Ginny, Neville, Luna, Ron, and Hermione, the ghost of Ron in this case, like on the run from the Order of the Phoenix.
I wonder if at this point new students are warned to not befriend Harry because his friends die.
Yeah.
By McGonagall in front of Harry's face. Not that one.
Stay away from that guy.
That guy. We got Half-Blood Prince and then Deathly Hallows.
Half-Blood Prince was another difficult one. I also put it as a psychological thriller. Kind of like a Silence of the Lambs, learning about the villain, diving into his mind, seeing the horror kind of from afar for a little while. You know, but I think we have to like really ramp up everything that Voldemort does. You know, you see all the like quote, quote, on-screen, on-page moments, the killing of Hepzibah Smith, the murder of the Riddles, Creature's Tale would be like, you see it from Creature's perspective. Like you really inhabit all of those horrible things that he is doing, in order to achieve what he's trying to do. And it's more about like because it's already learning the backstory of the villain. It's really diving into, this is a really horrifying person and he's here. Like you're getting all of that backstory. Yeah. I'm not sure how you make that, like how in the end, like you really get, I guess, the death to ramp up in this. I mean, obviously you have some death, but like, I'm not sure how you like it almost is like a little bit more of a setup, like a part 1 to a part 2 type of a situation. Yeah. But I think that if you really, really dig into all of those memories of how he's getting all of these Horcruxes and all the murders that he's committing to get there and all the testing of his safeguards in every location, like really creepy. And it's almost like you can even have people volunteering to go with him so that they can get information on what's going on. And then they end up dying there, like, because he's testing all of his like creations on them. So it could be like, a detective-y psychological where it's like you like someone is volunteering, maybe even like an insomnia type of thing of like, I'm volunteering. I'm going to go. I'm going to find out what's happening. I know that this guy is involved. I'm going to go here and like see why all these murders or deaths are occurring. And I'm going to follow this guy and befriend him. But then they end up like dying towards the end of it. It's less about Harry though. Like you can't have it focus really on anything that's happening with Harry unless he's the one who's the detective going in. But he'd be, all these things happen in the past. So it's like, it's hard to kind of wrap that in.
I think the memories that we see of Voldemort, like I think Dumbledore goes and finds the kids that were tortured by him in the cave. And we see it from their perspective. I think we start the story off not with the other minister, but with Creature's Tale, so that cave is looming throughout the entire story. I think that the castle starts to become somewhat of a villain, where those dark passages at night become like visually what the cave is going to be for Harry later down the road.
Interesting.
And I think that Harry's detective story parallels with like Dumbledore's detective story of trying to get Voldemort information, and Harry's trying to understand Draco.
Interesting.
Right? Because Draco, I think, becomes a major villain here, where like the use of his Imperius curse is quite scary. He's trying to kill off Harry as well as Dumbledore, and so maybe students are dying, and he's using them as inferi, like one or two at a time, so that it builds up thematically towards this inferi moment in the cave, where I think we sort of plant the seeds of these visual seeds in the eye of the reader or the watcher, and we're ramping up that way. I also think like some things that I think definitely happen in here is Hagrid is killed by the Acromantula. Like when he tries to save Aragog, he does not end up surviving that, and I think this makes it Irvin's favorite book even more so. I think Dumbledore's death is way worse, right? Like he's telling Snape like, don't let Bellatrix play with me, don't let Fenrir get to me, and I think one of them does. It's possible that Harry loses Ginny here, although I'm not convinced on that one. Like I think Fenrir might get someone, whether it's Bill or Fleur or whoever. I wonder if Irvin and I talk all the time about how Hermione could make it an incredible villain.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we get Dark Hermione here because of Ron's like sexual appetite for Lavender. We get glimpses of her being sort of nasty. More what happens to Mariana Edgecombe or whatever her name is than anything else. But we start to see glimpses. And then my what if is what if Voldemort turns up in the cave after Dumbledore's died and uses his residuals of magic still left in his body through the Inferi to attack Harry. So now it's Harry versus Voldemort and Inferi Dumbledore.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, this feels to me like part 1 of 2. Like like the because as we were talking about earlier, in the like horror movie structure, you'd be looking for like, oh no, a bad thing is happening. There's a bad guy. I do not have the power. How do I find the power? And this whole bit is how do I find the power more than any other book is.
Definitely.
That's a great point. Yeah. It's a great point.
It could be like an It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, time jump.
Yeah.
Where you have the Dumbledore investigating Voldemort back when all these things are happening. Time jump, Harry investigating Draco. Oh, look, they're tied together because of XYZ situation. Right. I think that it could definitely work as a part 1, part 2 for sure.
And then I think we have sort of the trope of like dark father, dark son, where it's not Lucius who's the father figure. Like Draco is there in the cave with Voldemort. Because if those two stories are coinciding, they have to meet somewhere at the end. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I love that. And it brings him in a lot more to, yes, he is a Death Eater.
Yeah.
And here is why. And also, Voldemort has a theme of using his young Death Eaters to perform some of the most horrible things.
Yeah.
You know, he's got Barty Crouch Jr.
And
he's got Regulus.
Yeah.
He's, you know, and so now he's got Draco. And I think, yeah, that's a really good addition for sure.
Yeah. And then we have Deathly Hallows, the part 2.
Yeah. I think you have to make this one found footage. As like
because of all of the it's Blair Witch Project in the forest and
exactly. There's too many elements to kind of place it in one specific category with, you know, you can't really have just one werewolf or vampire or something like that. You can have everything from Bill and Flora's wedding, where there's like maybe a little bit of glimmer of hope, to the whole camping experience. You know, the forests that they end up in end up being attacked every time. Everybody's attracted to that area. They can't escape it. Nagini emerging from Bathilda's body, you know, that in it of itself is probably one of the most horrifying things that happens in the entire series.
That actually happens in the series,
yeah, that actually happens. And you can have, you know, the Battle of Hogwarts, but make it make sense within the horror context. You know, you could even GoPro it like a hardcore Henry, you know, like from the perspective, like they have it attached to them so they can still be fighting and performing spells and everything during the battle. And it's not necessarily, you know, one person. So it's not like one person's just filming and not participating, which tends to be. I
almost think there can't be a battle.
Yeah, I agree.
Interesting. Well, I'm thinking like Cloverfield.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that. I think that those battles, they have such a tendency to remove the horror elements that it's much more of a small person. Like you could do a Department of Mysteries level, I think. Yeah. Where like you're broken off and you're doing all of these things. But the idea of like having sort of this grand fantasy video game finish, I think is what draws me away from that battle.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was just picturing Cloverfield in my head because you have all the found footage and then it's like the invasion and everybody's running and it's chaotic and it's all this stuff and you kind of don't know what's happening, who's dead, who's alive type of a situation. But you definitely have Harry being the cameraman going into the forest.
Yeah, totally.
And I think he dies. I think he dies there. He dies in the forest and a Death Eater picks up the camera to be like, ha, 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 we got him. Gloating type of situation. Films from their perspective from then on to the end. You know, maybe that Death Eater ends up dying and then Neville or Luna picks it up or something like that because they're like
or
someone
before he dies.
They have to see, like people have to know, they have to see what has happened and like they spirit the footage away and then it kind of leaves you like, but what actually happened? Like you don't know quite the end because they want the footage to be saved. So they like leave. When you could leave it on that like haunting note of like, but who's dead? Like, kind of that like anticipation could maybe not even like be resolved.
Or it's one of those things where somebody turns on the camera years later to be like, life sucks still. Like I'm in a shack. I'm in a shack somewhere else. Like and I'm hiding. And we're still hiding. Yeah. Like this is day one of blah 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 blah. And like that's where
you could even have could even have Neville and Luna do it together.
Yeah.
As like the sole survivors, essentially. Like we're still hiding. We're still out here. The
Silver Trio is the only one that's still living. So it's Ginny, Neville, and Luna. And like Hermione and Ron. And I mean, Ron's already dead, clearly. But
Hermione has turned Dark Hermione.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hermione's turned Dark Hermione. She's hunting them.
Yeah.
Cool.
That is
bleak.
Tough.
I like it.
I like it. I'm here for it.
Yes.
I think my what if for this is like, what if blank is actually the main villain? And again, it kind of comes back to what we're talking about with Ludo and with Sirius and Remus, which is just like there's such a sense of safety. Oh, but wait, And like the three people is like Snape, right? Who once loved his mother, but fooled Dumbledore to trust him and kills Voldemort in order to be like the head terrible person. And then like he turns Harry, right? He cracks under all of this pressure. Once he realizes that he has been raised for slaughter, he just goes absolutely insane.
Loved our
and
Harry.
Then, yeah. And then Hermione, right, pushed over the edge, ready to kill all purebloods, including the Weasleys, and starts like a half-blood Muggle-born revolt of equal terror and proportions to Voldemort's.
See, and that would make sense why Neville, Luna, and Ginny are hiding from Hermione because they're all purebloods.
Yeah.
Luna's...
I don't know that we know, but... Sure.
Yeah, but both her parents
were
magical.
Yeah, but we don't know if like mom's
we don't know
Muggle.
She could be like deluded a little bit, but
just
she's
a
not
good
one of
person who's like maybe not.
Yeah, because all purebloods are related to each other. Let's remember.
Yes.
Yeah. Inbreeding is cool.
But it would track that there are the three remaining if you go this Hermione equal measure, because now they're being hunted by both sides.
Yeah.
Because they're all, essentially blood treaters to one side, and then they are, the purebloods to the other side. So they're equal, like they're being hunted equally by both.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like
it's a bleak ending. Horror movies.
You can't have a happy horror movie ending. Come on.
Well, the good news is there'll not be a 90 years later.
Unless
it's during the video footage. Like that is the 19 years later.
Oh, that is the 19 years later. Oh.
That would be such a long time.
Oh my God.
Incredible.
For the video camera to just sit there. It's like, what's the famous cell phone brand? It's just one of those.
Nokia.
The Nokia video camera. Yeah. Nokia video camera. Oh man. All right. So I have, I went through last night and spent 2.5 hours writing this out until like 4:30 in the morning. So, it might be crazy bad. However, this is Harry Potter as a horror told by me.
Oh boy.
Raised in a cupboard, Harry Potter has never known the outside world. Left on his doorstep by an elderly wizard named Albus Dumbledore, Harry has been raised by his aunt and uncle, Petunia and Vernon. Abused by their son Dudley, Harry stays at home as the labor force. He waits on the only family he has and has never been to school. He knows more about how to clean and cook than any math or writing. When Dumbledore sends a man named Rubeus Hagrid to check on the boy for Harry's 10th birthday, just to make sure that he's ready for magic school, Hagrid finds something horrible. Harry is chained when he sleeps, beaten constantly if he asks questions or says anything about magic, and isn't even given food most meals. In a rage, Hagrid kills the Dursleys, all of them, and takes Harry to live with him in his hut by the castle. After a year of hard work, Harry is below grade level but finally literate and able to do most basic schoolwork. Placed on a special learning pathway, Harry makes little friends at school except for one other dunce, Ron Weasley, who takes remedial muggle schooling with Harry. Harry, who has had nightmares for years about a man with red eyes, begins to learn of his terrible past. All the while, someone is trying to break into the Forbidden Corridor. When Ron and Harry save Hermione Granger from trying to kill the troll that murdered her best friend on Halloween, the new friend, Rebecca Rothlington, they gain the smartest witch of the school as their best friend, though she can be a know-it-all and a bit too attached. Harry and all know the dangers around them, and Harry is constantly reminded about how dangerous magic is, and the grounds can be. Head girl Georgia Grundleson strays too close to the grasp of the giant squid. Ravenclaw's 7th year Aurora Chang is killed by something terrible when she finds our golden trio trying to break into the Forbidden Corridor. Harry, Neville, Draco, and Hermione watch as their fellow first-year Gryffindor, Matthew Motley, is killed during detention in the Forbidden Forest. Harry, Ron, and Hermione survive the gauntlet down to the Sorcerer's Stone, with Hermione and Ron nearly killed and having to withdraw, but Harry fights his worst fear of being consumed by the Mirror of Erised and watches as Voldemort flees Quirrell's body as he is absorbed by the mirror as a replacement for the stone. Harry's last memory of that moment are the gut-wrenching scream of Quirrell as the mirror's power draws him towards his death. In his 2nd year, Harry Potter no longer needs to be rescued from the Dursleys. He lives in a castle and is escorted to the dungeons by Snape and Dumbledore, who destroyed the mirror, so he no longer need worry. Ginny Weasley wants to be something special, just like her brother Ron does. She and the Weasleys spend their summer Harry free until the last several weeks when Harry's invited over. When Harry goes missing in Nocturne Alley, she goes looking for Harry only to be captured by 3 hags who kill each other for the right to eat her. And to her humiliation, she is rescued by Harry and Ron, who have no patience for her stupidity. But this new diary talks to her, makes her feel special, and promises she can have everything she wants. The only problem is sometimes she can't remember things. And things, terrible things, are happening at the school. Students are going missing, and in her dreams she can see them clearly being eaten by a giant snake. She can recall saying words she doesn't know, and she's constantly covered in blood and feathers. Her hero is likewise miserable. Harry is being blamed for saying something different that Ginny can oddly understand. But she says nothing. The diary tells her to be quiet. After Percy's girlfriend Penelope Clearwater goes missing, with Ginny remembering her being eaten whole, and Hermione being petrified, she tries to get rid of the diary, but to her horror, Harry finds it. Harry is led to believe Hagrid is responsible. He turns in his adoptive father of 2 years. What a shame. Harry turns him into the Ministry, but does Hagrid the courtesy of Sherlock Holmesing his last clue? Follow the spiders. With the help of pompous Justin Finch-Fletchley, Harry and Ron find the Acromantula pit, only to nearly die there, and can only watch as Justin is consumed by Aragog for the right to speak to the spider. Something Hagrid does with expelled students in order to keep the spiders from attacking the school. The diary goes missing during this night, and Ginny is totally possessed. Down to the dungeons she goes. At last, Harry puts it together just in time to save Ginny, but don't worry, Gilderoy Lockhart can help. Except he turns on Ron and Harry, who are happy to see his memory go, and then his body, as the Basilisk finds him a tasty treat. Ron goes to save his sister, Harry defeats the Basilisk, but only after several near misses of death. Thank God, phoenixes are essentially Batman's utility belt of magic. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry and Hagrid no longer trust each other after Harry turned in Hagrid in the previous book. He runs away from home after a long argument with the groundskeeper. He runs into a dog of massive size, but is saved by the night bus. The Ministry hates the half-giant anyway, so Fudge allows for Harry to live in Diagon Alley for the rest of his youth, paid for out of Harry's pocket, of course. The split pea soup actually does eat Tom, the barman, in this one. The Weasleys, Harry, and Hermione start their 3rd year on the right foot for all of about 6 seconds. Dementor's on the train. Remus Lupin is able to save most of the train, but a young first-year Ravenclaw was partially kissed, something Harry barely saw before blacking out.
Can I just question your logic of how do you know someone who's not been sorted?
A second-year Ravenclaw. Well done. Yes. Very true. A second-year Ravenclaw was partially kissed, something Harry barely saw before blacking out and reliving his parents' murder completely in his mind. The grounds are plagued with Dementors, and Harry's first Quidditch match ends in the first Weasley casualty. Dementors swarm the stadium. Headboard Percy, attempting to save his Gryffindors from the onslaught, is kissed, and his soul is removed from his body. Looking much like a ghost, the scene of the Dementors feeding on his soul is ghastly and terrible, as are the sounds of Percy's soul being gnawed to death. But Harry can learn to fight them. A lot of good that does when Harry, Ron, and Hermione finally meet Sirius Black, Animagus, who wants nothing more than to squeeze Ron's pet rat to death. Stopped in the nick of time by Remus, Harry and company get a rundown of the horrible turncoat, Pettigrew, who confesses numerous and horrible crimes against the Weasleys over the last 12 years. Now it's Ron who wants to kill Peter the most, something Harry stops, which Ron never truly forgives. Sirius and Remus are allies, Peter is not, but Harry realizes they need Peter as a chip to save Sirius. Turns out Remus didn't take his potion, and Snape is ready to kill Remus for this blunder. He may or may not care if the children die in the fight. But Remus transforms and bites Snape, almost killing him. The werewolf tosses Sirius aside and chases the kid straight into the arms of Dementors. But not to worry, time travel is a thing, and the trio, minus a grumpy and injured Ron, save the day, allow Sirius to live, but Peter to escape, and of course, Snape goes on for the rest of the series being a werewolf. In Goblet of Fire, someone is killing people everywhere Harry goes. Quidditch World Cup. Muggles and Mudbloods dead, Winky dead, Ludo Bagman dead, Rita Skeeter dead. The cursed but magical binding Triwizard Cup seems rigged in Harry's favor, but all the other champions seem to be dying except for Cedric, Crumb, and Fleur, and Harry. Harry doesn't have a saving people thing. After watching people drown, he ensures the safety of all the contestants' hostages, though loses a few to the dangers of the deep. The maze is terrifying, but Harry spots a young, harrowed-looking man helping him. An oddity. For sure. Harry is injured by an acromantula, and Cedric clearly beats him, but they split the cup, for Cedric is nice. Voldemort returns, kills several of his Death Eaters to prove a point, and uses their and Cedric's corpse to try and kill Harry. It's too bad Priori Incantatem exists, and Harry's own shadows of the past stop Voldemort's plan. But Harry can expect a summer full of nightmares after witnessing the lights of Angelina Johnson, Cedric, Fleur, Crumb dying in front of his face. Hermione laments the death of one of her more closest people, Victor Crumb. In Order of the Phoenix, Molly Weasley cannot defeat a Boggart, which almost kills her. Tonks is able to fight off a Lethifold, but Mundungus is not, and Creature may be responsible for these attacks. 12 Grimmauld Place is literally trying to kill its inhabitants. Dumbledore, like everything else, is only consumed by defeating Voldemort, who's somehow worse than all of these other terrible things. He can't even look at Harry, although Harry can't tell anymore. Dolores Umbridge is torturing children in horrible ways. Hermione gets it the worst at the beginning for daring to question her non-existing teaching credential, sowing seeds of deep contempt against the ministry for Hermione. Fred and George are expelled for candy experiments gone terribly wrong, but they start a successful business anyways. Arthur Weasley dies. He dies in a duel with Nagini/Voldemort, and now Voldemort knows Harry is inside his head. Harry doesn't know what he's seeing isn't real. He tries to seek help after leading his girlfriend Shoutout to the lake despite her protestations that this was how her older sister died, and then watching as the giant squid pulls her below the water, never to be seen again. But Dumbledore has no time for Harry, who starts attacking anyone around him. Ron, depressed from his father's death, gives up on Harry. Hermione tries to keep them together. The mass breakout of Azkaban isn't as notable as Fudge's demise due to the Dementor's kiss afterwards. Ginny becomes Harry's closest friend, able to tell when he's being possessed, just as she has. But Snape's occlumency classes are going terrible, and Harry cannot believe his own godfather when he sees how Sirius tried to get Remus to kill Snape back in the day. He needs to confront Sirius, but Sirius isn't home. He's in London. Harry leaves school to find Sirius in the Department of Mysteries. Hermione, Luna, Neville, Ginny go to save him. Ron stays behind, hoping Harry dies. Neville dies instead, strangled by the brains meant for Ron to survive. Dumbledore speaks of the irony of the other boy who could have defeated Voldemort, having just died. As did Sirius, imperioused by Bellatrix to walk through the archway. Harry almost defeats Voldemort, anger fueled by his godfather's death to use Voldemort's method of mind control against him. But Voldemort survives both Harry and Dumbledore, and uses occlumency to prevent Harry from ever doing that again. Voldemort reveals all, and Ron can only apologize for not being there. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry has found a book. It gives him spells, magic with power, though he's not careful. Harry can't fight his demons, and his spells almost kill Draco and other Slytherins who are too scared to tell adults. Ron and Lavender are too into each other, and Draco, in revenge for Harry's attack, uses Imperius to have Lavender strangle Ron to death. Hermione can only lament, and the quest is on to kill Draco. But little does she know that Draco is bringing backup. Hagrid is worried about Aragog, but Harry doesn't have time to worry about him anymore. Aragog is dead, and Hagrid is eaten. Meanwhile, Harry is learning much from Dumbledore about the horrors of Voldemort's past. Ron's death be damned. Horcruxes are real. Harry has to destroy them. Hermione and Harry fight. Ginny takes Hermione's side. Ron must be avenged, but they haven't seen what Harry's seen. They haven't traversed through Voldemort's past, and seen that Ron's death is the tip of the iceberg. Harry and Ginny break up. The cave. Harry and Dumbledore go into the cave. Dumbledore becomes an Inferi. Harry lives barely and returns to the Death Eaters storming the castle looking to kill Dumbledore. Harry kills Crabbe and Goyle. Hermione shows her true power, and the rest of the Death Eaters scamper, except for Snape and Draco. Snape has betrayed them and uses all of Harry's new learned spells against him. Oh wait, no, he created them. And he escapes. Draco cannot run far from Hermione, who kills him by removing all the air from his lungs, just as he had imperioused Lavender to do to Ron. In Deathly Hallows, the Death Eaters launch an attack on all of Harry's allies. Molly is killed, Tonks is wounded, Fred and George survive, Bill and Charlie are killed, Kingsley survive, Remus dead, Ginny taken alive. Harry is protected by the most powerful witch of his age, Hermione. With Harry's deduction and Hermione's knowledge, they are able to survive the worst of the Horcruxes, though the locket causes a huge fight between Harry and Hermione. Nagini eats Bathilda in front of them. Dementors are sucking out the souls of muggles and wizards alike. Scotland is overrun with spiders. The students at Hogwarts are tortured and killed as the Death Eaters like. Eventually, Hermione and Harry are caught. Hermione is left in a room with Fenris for him to eat, only to be saved by Dobby and Harry, leading her to destroy everything in Malfoy Manor, including the Malfoys, Bellatrix, Luna, Dean, Griphook, and Dobby. Oh. Harry's wand is destroyed, though he managed to get Lucius' wand before he died. They learn of the Horcrux in Gringotts and that Voldemort is holding Ginny hostage in Snape's office at Hogwarts. Gringotts goblins are just all in fury, trying to kill Harry and Hermione as they descend into the depths. Hogwarts is the place. Harry's seen it now. They need to rescue Ginny too, but Hogsmeade is crawling with Dementors, giants, acromantulas, all evil things. Aberforth Dumbledore is able to smuggle them past Umbridge, who is eventually stampeded to death by centaurs at the end of this book. The battle begins, and it's worse than the Triwizard Tournament. Every dead is controlled by Voldemort, even Snape, who Voldemort feeds to Nagini. But then he loses power. Someone is more powerful. Hermione takes control, destroying the tiara and the cup. And while Ginny finishes off Nagini and Harry Voldemort, Hermione's monologue about starting anew after the battle is over reminds Harry of a young Tom Riddle. They duel, Harry with the Elder Wand, but it isn't his. Hermione killed Draco and destroyed Harry's wand. Harry is killed by Hermione, who doesn't suspect a thing as Ginny aims a killing curse and disposes of this new would-be dictator, leaving only her to tell the tale of what happens when you meet violence with violence and horror with horror.
Ooh. Ginny's the best.
For the podcast listeners, I did not know Sequoia's favorite character was going to be Ginny when I wrote that.
She rules.
She rules.
Wow.
That was intense.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Harry Potter's a lot more intense as a horror story.
I like that you invented people to immediately kill them.
That was good.
And went with Rowling's penchants for like using
alliterative names.
Yeah, alliterative names.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening to that. That was a lot of time there. And now we have to say goodbye to our wonderful guest.
Thank you.
A huge thank you for being on. You are welcome anytime to our little pod.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this was so fun. This is the perfect marriage between the two things that I do.
Excellent.
So it was really fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Where can we follow you? What do you have to plug for us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my two podcasts, Fanatical Fix and Where to Find Them and But Make It Scary, you can find on your podcatcher of choice. Sweet. If you want to follow me personally on the social medias, I am on Instagram at Sequoia Simone and also TikTok at Sequoia Simone.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, we will put those into on the website as well, so you can follow Sequoia there. Again, Sequoia, you were absolutely brilliant to have on. Thanks so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
And listeners, go check out Sequoia's podcast.
Yes, please. They're great.
Mm-hmm.
It's just awesome having Sequoia. She's such a phenomenal podcaster, and her stuff is so great. So big thanks to her.
Yes.
We've got one little last thing for y'all, which is our 7 ingredients of today's special at the pub.
Which I can only imagine will taste horrible.
I'm sure. Worse than the split pea soup.
Yes.
And I actually love split pea soup, so I'm insulted by that movie quote. It's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so today's special is identifying what are each book's biggest elements primed for switching to horror. Now, I'm the only one that's written into here, so you two feel free to absolutely disagree with me if you were like, no, it's this. But to kick us off, I thought in Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone that the Forbidden Forest detention scene is the biggest element that's most primed for horror.
I mean, aside from actual tasks at the end to get to the stone.
Yeah.
I would assume. So if we I don't think it works out for all of the ideas you put out here, but if we were to say we sort of exclude the end fighty sort of things because they all lend each other really well to horror. So if we were to pick something before the last final chunk in the book, then I would say yes.
Yeah.
And also Mars is bright tonight.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's got to be either one of those two. Unless you were going to actually show Harry's parents' death scene. But that's not technically in the book, so.
Nah.
Yeah.
Forbidden Forest is way creepier.
Yeah. Cool. Chamber of Secrets. I've got Ginny neutering the roosters is the no, I'm kidding. It's the spiders to me. It's got to be the spider scene.
It's the forest again.
Yeah. Definitely the forest again. Forest again.
Yeah. Is it the forest every? Oh wait, no, it's not. So I think that one's pretty cut and dry. It's a bunch of spiders. Like they're trying to kill some kids and eat them.
Yeah.
There's no Fort Anglia. Like
they're saved by a car, which is ridiculous. Anyway,
but in the horror version, they're not. They just let Justin Finch Fletchley be eaten.
Yeah.
Sorry to all the Hufflepuffs.
Finch.
For a Prisoner of Azkaban, I've got Dementi Whatsits. Like they're just
they just are
horrible. That Definitely. any element of them in the story, I think, makes it horrific. And maybe the Boggart, has the potential to be way scarier, right?
Yeah.
I think they almost need to be, because I think the way that we're introduced to them, because we are reading from 13-year-olds, we're like, they show us something terrible, we make it funny, easy. But then later on, obviously, when we see Molly see it, we as readers, at least the first time through, probably only then realize how terrible they are. Yeah. Because, they are sort of, it is a classroom scenario, there's a teacher who's in control, it is, in the end, they're all like, it's a great lesson, we had a good time, we learned something, but it isn't as scary as it could be.
Yeah.
True.
There's two camps of what is the purpose of a Boggart transforming, which is one is that's how it eats, that's how it kills its prey. And the other one is it's a self-defensive mechanism and they're not actually harmful. I lean towards the former because of the way that wizard kind treats them. But then after watching Fantastic Beasts and getting a better sense that magical creatures are just hated upon, I'm like, oh, okay, so it really could be either, and I don't know. Yeah. But I think in this particular sense, it would be the Boggart is there to kill you specifically, if we're going with a horror element. And then that makes me question right. Okay, so Ron becomes an acromantulus, so can then the Boggart just eat it like a spider would, or how does that work? And I think that's when things starts to be really scary, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, you would have to presume so, because from Harry training with the Boggart for the Dementors, it still feels very real to him. He still has the same, the effects the Dementors having on him are still pretty much the same. Yeah. So I would assume that a Boggart acromantula is just as deathly as a real one.
It's an almost copy. It's it's a facsimile because in the maze, when he encounters one, he thinks it's a Dementor until it trips. So it's almost it's almost the at full capacity of whatever that creature is. Yeah. Mine would turn into a Lethifold.
I know! They're terrifying.
Mine would turn into a Lethifold for sure. Those are terrifying. Yeah. Absolutely terrifying.
Put on a cloak.
Read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the original little textbook, if you don't know what a Lethifold is.
I mean, if it's a specific thing, then I agree. Otherwise, I think probably for most people, it would be what Molly sees, as in her family dead.
Yeah. The concept of something.
That's very true.
After reading Lethifolds, I'm like, okay, if I was actually a wizard, I would practice nonverbal, wandless patronuses as much as possible.
Yeah.
Terrifying. For Goblet of Fire, I think the graveyard scene is the thing that's most set up. Yeah. You could argue the lake, but I think it's got to be the graveyard because of like what the climax of that moment means.
Now, if we're taking the earlier rule of not the final climax and having something earlier, then I'd probably say the lake. Drowning is definitely one of my largest fears. So that would be absolutely terrifying to me is the whole lake sequence.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Terrifying.
Yeah, especially if we make every lake inhabitant worse.
Right, definitely. Like the more people are actively trying to kill you, the what are they called? Is it Grindylows? I called them Kelpies earlier, and I definitely meant Grindylows. Like, there's not a Japanese water horse just in there trying to murder Harry and Angelina Johnson. Yeah, the Grindylows. Everything I think is really scary about that scene. Definitely. And the dragon thing is scary, but like it's such a big beast that I'm like, it's scary on like on an adventure level, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third task, I think that they tried to make it a little horror-y with like the maze is the one attacking because they didn't have the budget to like
make a sphinx,
make all these creatures. Yeah, make a sphinx.
It's so hilarious to think that, you know, a movie the scale of Harry Potter didn't have the budget.
Right.
It's like...
Yeah, for real. Especially like
I was disappointed. 4. I was really looking forward to the Sphinx. So
yeah, that's one of my favorite moments. It's such a moment of like of triumph from Harry. That's not just brawn. Like he actually uses his head for the first time.
He's actually being intelligent.
Like it's not just Quidditch or Expelliarmus. He's like, hey, it's Spider.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Right.
Order of the Phoenix. I went because we talked about the psychological elements of like occlumency and legitimacy so much. I went with something different, which was Umbridge torturing children and like what a school looks like with Umbridge and Filch running it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'd agree with that. If you lean into it, you can definitely turn Order of the Phoenix into a torture horror.
I mean, is essentially what happens in Deathly Hallows at Hogwarts. Yeah,
true. Very true.
Just see it all off screen.
Right.
Yeah.
For Half-Blood Prince, I have Malfoy utilizing students from the inside. So, like, think Katie Bell, but it's, like, way, way worse. He is using them for all sorts of nefarious reasons that the Imperious Curse could be used for. And you never really know who to trust, right? Like, Pius Thickneys becomes, right, Imperious and starts taking over other people. And I think that's the same. I think that's, to me, that's the scariest thing of this book.
Yeah.
Trying to think of what else we could dial
I mean, I think the most upsetting is definitely Creature's Tale.
Right.
Yeah.
That is an element that is prime for horror.
Which is technically later.
Yeah, it's in Deathly Hallows.
It's in Deathly Hallows, but you have the introduction to Creature. I don't know. I guess if we're going with something that's specifically in there, you could even have Grimmauld Place and just how much is trying to kill you in there. It's
trying to actively kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a very tiny moment idea.
Yeah.
Because it's been... The Slug Club is a big thing. And isn't the Christmas party where there's a vampire?
Oh my God. Yeah. That's a great... I mean,
it's maybe there's just...
Sort of the same idea that Sierra had around the Yule Ball is like that party could become a giant... Like, it's so cool how you could take the Yule Ball and that Christmas party and make those like a movie by themselves, a horror movie by themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a neat idea.
Last Voyage of the Demeter, but it's the Slug Club Christmas party.
Yeah. Although I will say, I think we're missing. We didn't say the obvious thing, which is the cave, but I think we went over that pretty easily.
But climax, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Deathly Hallows. I said the tent trying to eat Harry, Hermione, and Ron.
Was it, Sam, when you filled this
like 4:00 in the morning. But that would be terrifying if you woke up and somebody transfigured your tent into like literally consuming you. I am kidding. I feel like it's got to be the Malfoy Manor scene. Is like you just don't know with Fenrir like what his intentions are with Hermione, and to be separated out like that is like with Harry and Ron being in the dungeon. I just feel like there's a lot of terribleness in a mansion that is filled with dark things that can happen during that entire episode. Again, I feel like you could make an entire movie out of just like being trapped in that house.
I think the only other very obvious candidate for this one is Godric's Hollow.
Yeah.
Godric's Hollow is terrifying.
Yeah. Room of Requirement, you could make an argument for.
Yeah.
That could be quite horrific, but most primed, probably not.
Yeah. No, I think either Malfoy Manor or Godric's Hollow. I'd probably lean towards Godric's Hollow just because
the snake
Nagini,
woman.
the whole Nagini thing. I mean, as we said, like that is already like the most horrifying thing in.
Well, and I remember reading that scene for the first time when Rowling does such a good job of laying this gentle graveyard crying Christmas scene, and then there's a lone figure standing in the snow, and like the immediacy of which this on the sentence level it spooks you is really, really, I think, quite terrifying. And then, of course, we get, like, it turns more into an adventure thing eventually with the battle against the snake. But, boy, it's scary. Yeah. I think I'm wrong there. I think it's definitely got to be Godric's Hollow and not the tent eating them.
Well, folks, if you'd like to buy us the next round, you can head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks. That's with the numeral 3 to sign up. We're offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, and on-episode shout-outs to our patrons. We would really appreciate your help in keeping the lights on at the 3 Broomsticks so that we can talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come. You can also help by rating and reviewing us. And if you like our show, please don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth is very helpful, and we always love to see those comments and those recommendations.
If you'd like to contact us in some way, shape, or form, which I'm sure you do, you can find us on social media on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. I guess we could call that X now. It's no longer Twitter, folks. It's X. Our assorted handles can be found on the episode descriptions in our website. Our website is 3broomstickspod.com. That's with the 3 spelled out. 3broomstickspod.com. We've got links to the essays we mentioned. You can submit a topic. Let us know your thoughts. If you want to find Sequoia Simone, go to look at the links there. You can email us too.
Or if you want to know more about horror.
Yes. Very good point. All of Aurelia's lovely research on horror is there for you to be able to see. You can email us at 3broomstickspod@gmail.com. That's with the number 3. 3broomstickspod@gmail.com. We love reading your emails. Please send them to us.
The next time we meet at the 3 Broomsticks, we will be discussing Halloween.
Because only good stuff happens at Halloween.
Only good stuff.
The good
exactly. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Sierra.
I'm Oreo.
I'm Sam. Thank you for listening, and see you next time at the 3 Broomsticks. Cheers!
This episode of the 3 Broomsticks was fun, wasn't it? The theme song you're listening to right now was originally performed by the band The Faithful Sidekicks, but the audio was taken and mangled beyond belief by the editor of this podcast, Patrick Musilek, who would like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us for these first 19 episodes. I certainly hope you'll be around for more. And remember, kiddies, to tune in next time when we discuss Halloween.
Cut that part out.
Maybe Patrick will leave it in. Maybe it'll Patreon content.
There you go. Wait, side note before we continue. Should we be recording the Skype?
100%.
Oh, I forgot that.
I can do that.
I've already grabbed it.
You did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Great.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
for either of you doing that. Lovely.
I was like,
All right.
oops.
Yeah, our backup audio. Yeah, we should have that. Oh dear Lord, Sierra.
This is going really well. Usually I just have it laying on the desk, so now it has to be like awkwardly propped on the microphone cord. So sorry if that happens again.
Kickstand.
Patrick, I'm so sorry.
This is 2023. There's a kickstand for phones now.
But it's not big. It doesn't work well enough.
Okay, fine. I acquiesce to your disgustingness.